Colin Baring, we're here at the EB-5 Investor Magazine and U Global event, and everybody in the industry is here. I would like to introduce Nima Korpivaara of KLD Attorneys, and I want to hear a little bit about KLD and what you guys do and how you can help investors.
As Colin said, I'm Nima Korpivaara. I'm a partner at KLD. We're a full-service immigration firm specializing in EB-5. Over the last 10 years, we have represented about 5,000 EB-5 investors. It makes us either the largest or the second largest firm in the EB-5 space. I believe we've been lucky enough to represent about 90% of Barings investors as well, with a 100% approval rate. We work a little bit differently than the other firms, mostly guided by our experience. We won't accept to work with just any project or any investor. We really want to keep the circle small. We want to work with institutional developers, best-in-kind projects. So we know when we discuss with an investor and we've reviewed their source of funds, 526 approval is guaranteed, the 829 approval is guaranteed, and the only anxiety they'll experience is processing times, rather than will the project move forward, will the project be capitalized, will the project create the jobs.
Tell us a little bit about the big difference for an EB-5 investor making a choice in an attorney, the difference between talking to general immigration attorneys and an EB-5 attorney.
Anybody that has any experience working with the government, and then certainly USCIS, knows a lot of these regulations, they're not published. We see adjudicative trends coming out of USCIS, which means unless you are seeing responses from the government in terms of requests for information, you don't know exactly what is going to be approved on the source of funds side. You may have an incredible attorney, but if they don't have EB-5 experience, they won't necessarily know the pitfalls. And the most classic example I give to investors is, if you own a company and your income from the company is going to be used at the base of your investment, it needs to be distributed income. Even if you own the company 100%, it needs to be distributed income, otherwise your application will be denied. And unfortunately, we've received investors like this. They went with other experienced firms that just didn't know EB-5, and they got a denial after a very long wait time.
First question we always hear from our inquiries and our investors that are looking for attorneys, they want to know, will I be approved? And they want to know, what's the certainty? After you're looking at their initial information and about to file a case, how certain can you be that they're going to actually qualify to get approved?
I think if you, and again, this comes back to breadth of experience. If you've worked in the program as long as we have, EB-5 is actually quite predictable. Historically, EB-5 approval rates have been in the high 80s, low 90s. I know with near certainty, after I've seen your source of funds, your application is going to be approved. Certainly, if you are from a country that uses a Western banking system, has SWIFT, you will have the documents necessary to prove your income, and we will know that the application is approved. But even if you are from another country that is not Western banking, this is what we do. We have the experience to go through the source of funds, and we can give you that certainty of application approval, and again, remove anxiety. Because I think there's many competent attorneys. That's really what our job is, to remove the anxiety of the process, to remove the anxiety of the pressure, because it's your immigration, it's your life, it's your children's education, it's your movement to the U.S.
EB-5 investors will go online, try to do their own research, and they'll fall on some statistics out there for approvals, denials, and everything else in between. There's, call it a random quarter of data that shows a lot of denials. When someone's denied, what are the typical reasons that cause that?
One thing to keep in mind, when USCIS publishes denial statistics, a withdrawn case is also considered a denial. So if you're looking at the statistics, the most recent months, because of the shutdown of COVID, many investors had to change their life plans. They decided to abandon the EB-5 process. They withdrew the applications in mass. And those are all reported as denials, so it skews the statistics. The two most common things, and a lot of it is we blame attorney error. Again, inexperienced attorneys not knowing how to deal with source of funds. So I would say that's really number one for denial rate. The second, believe it or not, is actually projects. I say this to developers all the time, especially EB-5 investors that want to invest in their own business. I tell them, your business may be incredible, you may be an incredible developer. That doesn't mean that you are a good EB-5 project. The way the regulations are written, you are locked in. So for example, if you say that I'm building a restaurant in this block in New York City, if after a few months you see there's not enough foot traffic and you want to move, that may be a great decision for your business, but a very bad decision for your EB-5 and will likely cause denial. So these are the little nuanced pitfalls that you have to be aware of and your attorney needs to inform you of.
You're on your first phone call talking to an investor. What is your first piece of advice when they're starting out looking at EB-5?
It sounds crass, but U.S. immigration, it's not robust, and it's very much a question of time and money. So I think the first question we always ask is, what is your timeline to the United States? And that's going to narrow down the visa options. And then what are you willing to spend? Because quite often, the fastest path to the United States is an investment visa, whether that be an E2, an L1, or an EB-5. We really want to square away timeline. We want to square away goals for yourself or your family. Do you seek employment in the United States? Is it only education for your children? And then do you want to be an active entrepreneur or do you want to be a passive investor? And then that kind of narrows down the focus, because if we just wanted to have a conversation on EB-5, we could go through all the permutations of the program and spend hours without really accomplishing anything.
And you bring up the concept of time and money and what it means to immigration. Sometimes we have the investors that are looking at the regional center program for speed and simplicity and things like that, but then there's sometimes you have very, very well-heeled, experienced entrepreneurs, and they want to ask about the direct EB-5 program. So direct versus regional center, what do you think those main differences are, and what is the number one consideration in choosing one or the other?
I think there's some confusion that people seem to think direct and regional center are different programs, different investment amounts. TEA applies, TEA doesn't apply. The only difference between the programs is how jobs are calculated. So in a direct investment, you are counting W-2 jobs, people that come into the office, operate the business, they get a paycheck. In a regional center, you're using indirect and induced. So it's calculated through how much money you spend on supply chain, in materials, and then vertical construction or development. The real difference to EB-5 investors is W-2 jobs are not considered permanently created. So as you go through the immigration process, you file for the 829, which is the permanent green card, you go to prove that you created the 10 jobs, they need to be present at the time of that application. If you're an operating business, you need to be looking at a 4 or 5 year runway of success of maintaining employees to get the 829 approval. In a regional center setting, once the money is spent, the jobs are permanently created. So even if the project ultimately is a financial failure, you are still insured your green card because the jobs are created. And that subtle difference leads to 99, 98% of applications being regional centers. I think when we see direct investors, it's often they have a business opportunity in the United States, they're making the investment anyways, and would just like to qualify it as an EB-5. And those projects generally go well. I'd say the second type of investor is not necessarily happy with the return of whether it be 2%, 5%, 6% in EB-5 project, and feels that if they invest in themselves, they can garner much higher returns. But then again, you run into this pitfall of you may be an amazing entrepreneur, but you don't know how to administer an EB-5 program. And divorcing yourself from that process to ensure your green card is quite difficult for many investors because $800,000 or $1,050,000 is a lot of money. It's hard earned, and you would, of course, like to maximize your return on it.
Thank you, Nima. We appreciate it. Nima Korpivaara, KLD